Formative assessment strategies for learning. Strategy 1, providing students with learning goals, learning targets. Strategy 2, using examples and models of strong and weak work. Strategy 3, giving descriptive feedback. 4, students self-assess and set goals. 5, evidence of student learning needs. 6, design focused instruction. And 7, provide students opportunities to reflect on their learning. Where am I going? How do you know where to start? Look at the curriculum. Pre-assess student understanding of units and concepts. Pre-tests could be easy, effective, meaningful. They show growth. Requires little to no planning. You see where students are before you begin a unit. Strategy 1, providing students with a clear and understandable vision of the learning target. These things need to be, the target and the rubric need to be converted into student-friendly language so students understand how they're being assessed. It is so important to allow students to help write the learning targets and rubrics in the student-friendly language because this allows students to take ownership of their learning and they have a better understanding of how they will be assessed prior to completing an assessment. Strategy 2, it's important to use examples and models of strong and weak work. In terms of a persuasive writing assignment, you could post examples of an okay writing piece, a better writing piece, and the best writing piece in different levels. You can also provide a bulletin board where you show students how to improve upon their writing. Before completing an assessment, it's important to discuss with students what quality work looks like. With students, they need to develop the criteria for strong and weak work, and again, this helps students take ownership of their learning and they have a better idea of what is strong and what is weak. Where am I now? Now that strategies 1 and 2 are completed, what is next? Prior to assessing, the learning targets have been identified, the discussion has been taking place about what is strong and what is weak. It is now time to give effective feedback to students. Strategy 3, offer regular descriptive feedback during the learning. Direct attention needs to be placed to the learning. This occurs during the learning. It addresses the partial understanding and it does not do the thinking for the student. It provides feedback and the student takes that feedback and works with it. How do you give feedback? Immediate feedback, especially for younger students, written comments, 3-minute conferences, 2-color highlighting, peer feedback. I personally like the written comments and the mini conferences, just to open up that dialogue with students. Strategy 4, teaching students to self-assess and set goals for next steps. It is important to give students self-evaluation rubrics. Not only have the teacher evaluate it, but have the students self-evaluate it, as well as completing self-reflections of the learning throughout the learning process. And it is important to help students understand the difference between learning goals and achievement goals. A lot of times when students set goals, they say, oh, I just want to get an A. Making sure that students self-assess, they can do it through exit tickets, notes home, traffic lights, checklists, and KWL charts. How can I close the gap? Looking for evidence of student learning needs, focusing instruction and practice with feedback, and students should be given opportunities to track and reflect on their learning progress. And Strategy 5 is using evidence of student learning needs to determine the next steps in teaching. It's important to identify the types of errors due to incomplete understandings, flaws in reasoning, or misconceptions. Assessments that could be used would be selective response, written response, personal communication, and performance assessments. Here's an example of a task-specific rubric for a boat design. It's important for teachers to build a feedback loop, figure out where students are, what their needs are, and use those strategies that we have in our toolboxes to develop students' capabilities and make sure there's planned time to take action, and students are the ones taking the action. Strategy 6, design the focused instruction followed by practice with feedback. Spaced practice is more effective than mass practice, meaning a little bit here and there versus a big chunk of time. Practice with the learning intention, what are they practicing, and of course scaffolding, making sure it's at the right level of challenge for the students. Instruction and practice is so important. Some examples would be multiple choice questions and graphic organizers, the typical things that students could see when they do a final assessment that is graded. Make sure you give them practice time before you actually grade something. Strategy 7 provides students with opportunities to track, reflect on, and share their learning progress. Some examples would be journals, reflections and portfolios, recording information from assignments and assessments. I personally like the portfolio where students can constantly go back and reflect on the work that they're doing throughout the year. Another example will be conferences at home, at school, inviting parents to school. Student-led conferences are also up and coming thing right now. Students share their learning targets and goals, whether it's with parents, teachers, or other adults in the school. Where do you start? There are 7 strategies of assessment for learning. First of all, you need to ask yourself, where am I going? Where am I now? How can I close the gap? And this should be compared to the current curriculum that you have. Start out small and work your way through the 7 strategies for assessment of learning. And that would be clear and understandable vision of the learning target, using examples of strong and weak work, regular descriptive feedback, assessing and goals, self-assessment and goals, evidence of student learning needs, focused instruction, and having students track and reflect on their learning.